We have got the Premier League playoffs on Thursday night, and after 16 consecutive weeks on the road, the season concludes at the O2 in London. 3 of the world's top 4. You've got Michael van Gerwen Price, and Michael Smith, the world number 1, plus the 2021 Premier League champion Johnny Clayton. Looking at the lineup we've got, where does this foursome rank among the best fields we've had for a Premier League finals night?
It has to be up there, based on the fact that you end up with what is probably the 4 best players in the world right now. Maybe you could throw Luke Humphries into that conversation as well, although Luke hasn't been quite reaching the heights as last year, but he still made a few Euro Tour finals. He's still a contender every tournament he enters. Of course, though, he wasn't in the Premier League this year. Luke Humphries aside, and maybe Dirk van Dijvenbode aside, these are the 4 best players in the world, with just those other 2 being in the conversation. Johnny Clayton hasn't been as consistent this year, but in the second half of the Premier League season, he's been really good. That's why he played his way in the end. Michael Smith was struggling in the first half of the Premier League, as well as he took to the new role as being the player to beat the world champion, the world number 1. But boy, did he come on strong at the end, winning those 3 nights in a row, beating everyone in the field other than Dimitri Vandenberg across those 3 nights. Michael van Gerwen, and you'll hear this from Rod Studd later as well, he was the dominant force of the Premier League, winning 3 consecutive nights, making a UK Open final. But he hasn't been playing as consistently since then, but he's won a Euro Tour. He's won his share of events. Assuming he's healthy, he's right back in there in that conversation. And then obviously Gerwyn Price, who I think has never been as good as he is now, has never been close to as good as he is right now. And from week 7 on was clearly the best player in the Premier League. That's why he ended up topping the table and being the top seed. It's easy to have recency bias because, well, we only have fresh in our minds what's going on right now. And if you look back in history, there have been some phenomenal Premier League nights, and often as Premier League finals nights, and often it's the most unfancied player that comes through. You look at when Raymond van Barneveld, after losing all those semifinals, finally got through. It was in a field that involved Gary Anderson, Michael van Gerwen, Phil Taylor, that he was able to finally break through. Boy, is that a finals night. And there's been others like that. We do have recency bias. But in terms of the level that all 4 of these are playing at going in, especially when you add in the depth that's in the game right now, that you could say that these very likely are the 4 best players in the world right now. And there's only a couple other people even in that conversation. That's a pretty tough standard for any year to meet. I do think on paper, where these players are, this is the best. The best player in it is not the best entering, because there's been years that Michael van Gerwen or Phil Taylor were playing at a higher level than Gerwyn Price is entering this. But if you go back a month ago, I don't know if that was really the case. And Gerwyn Price isn't that far off of them. But then if you look at number 2, number 3, number 4, they are well ahead of where number 2, number 3, number 4 usually have been for the longest time. These are 4 players, any one of which could lift the title, and it really wouldn't be that much of a surprise. Well, I'm not going to make my prediction now. Give me 10 minutes because we'll be making it soon enough. But as I said, it's on paper 4-way race between 4 very deserving players.
Yeah, it is a really strong lineup. And I was having a think about this earlier when the lineup was confirmed for the O2 and starting off with the rankings, 3 of the world's top 4. That is a good start. You say, why isn't the world number 2 there, Peter Wright? But would you swap Peter Wright in for Johnny Clayton right now on current form and give yourself the top 4, all of them in there? I'd say no. And I think from the 8 players that started this Premier League and how the season has panned out, I think the 4 we've got is arguably the highest quality we could have got from what we've seen. And how does it compare to previous years? I was having a look back, and I think the earliest I'd go to possibly rival it is 2011. And you had Phil Taylor, Raymond van Barneveld, Gary Anderson, Adrian Lewis. And at that point, 3 of those 4 were proven winners in the PDC. You had Adrian Lewis, who just won his first world title, beating Gary Anderson in the final. Phil Taylor, Raymond van Barneveld, their resumes speak for themselves. But that was the night that Gary Anderson won his first major in the PDC. He won that Premier League and went on to achieve a lot more. And I really think that the golden period, if you like, for these finals nights. It was around 2013 to 2017. You had Michael Van Gerwen come into the mix. James Wade was in there a few times. Dave Chisnall, when he was in, some might say, that the best form of his career and could have won the Premier League in that 2015 finals night. Peter Wright, again, during one of his hot spells, and he'd go on to miss those match starts in 2017 to win the title. And I think as a fan watching that era, those 4 or 5 years, those finals nights, for me, was peak Premier League. And I think the 4 or 5 years after that, I don't think the lineup for the playoffs has been as strong as it was back then. But this year, in my opinion, I think it's the strongest lineup that we've had for a finals night, probably since at least 2017. I think you can make a compelling case for any of those 4 players on Thursday night to walk away with the title at the O2. And okay, 2 of them, they've never won it, and one of them has never been in the playoffs before. But those 2 players, Michael Smith, that's just the world number 1 and world champion, and Gerwyn Price, he's a former world number 1 and world champion, and both of them are multi-time major winners. They are proven winners as well. So the other 2, Michael Van Gerwen, he's 1 title away from being standalone the most successful player in the Premier League. Another title would move him on to 7. He's currently level on 6 with Phil Taylor. And then you've got Johnny Clayton, who has snuck in again to that 4th spot for the second time in 3 years. But the other year in between, he finished top. And in his first year, he won the title. So I wouldn't go as far as to say this is the best field we've had for a finals night. But looking back on more recent years, I'd say I'm more intrigued for this finals night than I have been for a good 4 or 5 years. And on paper, going into it, it's definitely got me hooked. And again, genuinely, I know we're going to come on to it in a moment, but I couldn't really say with any confidence who is going to win it.